It's 11 p.m., April 25th, 1986. You're one of several engineers in Control Room 4 tonight, and you've all been told to run a safety test. A routine one. You're following the procedure in front of you. Steps crossed out, notes scribbled in the margins, but you're not the one who decides how the night goes. Above you stands the deputy chief engineer, brought in to oversee this test, and he wants it finished. The reactor beneath all of you is an RBMK. Cheap, powerful, the pride of the Soviet Union. And it has a flaw nobody in this room has ever been told about. The test should have happened hours ago on the day shift. Experienced crew. Daylight. People who'd studied the plan. But the grid needed more power, so it got pushed back, hour after hour, until it landed here. On your shift, the tired one, in the dark, that was never meant to do this. Half of you are reading the procedure for the first time as the reactor hums under your feet. The order comes down to start lowering the reactor's power. Slow, controlled, that's the plan. But the reactor doesn't cooperate. It drops. Then it keeps dropping. 13,000 megawatts falling away to almost nothing, and it won't level off. The number on the panel bottoms out near 30, almost dead. You feel the mood in the room tighten. This isn't what was supposed to happen, and everyone knows it. This is the moment to stop. Shut it down, walk away, try again tomorrow. Somewhere in that room, people are thinking it, but shutting down means the test failed. And telling the men above you it failed. The supervisor pushes to continue. The deputy chief engineer backs him. There's pressure in his voice, the kind you don't argue with. The order stands, and when the order stands, the hands in the room obey, including yours. So the crew fights the reactor back to life. The control rods come out, the brakes of the whole machine. The rules say, keep at least 26 inside, always. Tonight the count drops to 8, maybe fewer. One operator pulls them on command. Another watches the gauges. Someone else calls the numbers out loud across the room. Nobody stops to add it all up because no single person is doing all of it. The responsibility is split across a dozen hands, and a split responsibility is an easy one to ignore. Almost every brake is out of the core now, and the reactor is still barely breathing. Picture what the whole room is actually sitting on. A machine with its engine flooded, and someone's floored the gas while the brakes are being yanked out at the same time. Nobody sees it that way. There's no gauge on the wall that says you are now in terrible danger. The paper says, pull the rods. The man in charge says, finish the test. So the test goes on, and the clock keeps moving toward a number none of you will ever forget. 1:23 a.m. It finally begins. Steam to the turbine is cut, measurements start, and for a few seconds, everything looks normal. A few seconds of calm that, later, people will study frame by frame. Then the power starts to climb. Not gently. The water inside the core is flashing into steam, and in this reactor, because of that flaw nobody was told about, steam doesn't slow the reaction down. It speeds it up. More steam, more power, more steam. A loop feeding itself, doubling in seconds, screaming past every limit on the panel. Alarms. Red everywhere. Someone shouts a warning, and a hand goes for the one button that's supposed to save everyone in the room. A Z5, emergency shutdown, slams every control rod back into the core at once. The rescue button. The one thing you're taught to trust when everything else is going wrong, it gets pressed. And that's the cruelest part of the whole night, because the tips of those rods are made of graphite, and graphite, for the first instant it enters the core, doesn't slow the reaction. It spikes it. The button built to stop the reactor gives it one final push instead. The whole room reached for the brake and hit the accelerator, and not one of them knew there was a difference. Nobody told them. It wasn't in any manual they were allowed to read. The power jumps to hundreds of times what the reactor was ever built to hold. Fuel channels rupture. The rods jam halfway down, stuck, useless. And the pressure underneath lifts a 1,000-ton steel lid off the top of the building like it weighs nothing. 2.5 hours ago, a shift clocked in for a routine test. Now the core is open to the sky, and not one person in that room did it alone. The tired operators, the supervisor who wouldn't quit, the engineer above them giving the orders, the designers who hid the flaw, and a machine that lied to all of them. This is where the real story begins. Not with the explosion, but with everything that comes after it. Here's the thing about that moment. You can't see what's wrong. No fire to point at, no gas cloud, no sound. The most dangerous thing in the world right now is invisible. The core is throwing out radiation at a level a human body simply cannot survive being near. Firefighters arrive within minutes with no idea what they're walking into. They think it's an ordinary rooftop fire. They pick up chunks of graphite off the ground with their bare hands, pieces of the reactor core itself, glowing faintly. Many are dead within weeks, from doses so high that medicine had almost nothing to offer them. For a full day, the town of Pripyat doesn't even know. Nearly 50,000 people, families, kids on bikes under a sky that glows a strange color from the ionized air above the plant. Some come out to watch it. They stand on a bridge and look at the light, not knowing it's the most dangerous view in the world. That bridge gets a nickname you never want a bridge to have. The evacuation takes 36 hours. When it comes, people are told to pack for 3 days. They leave meals on tables, laundry on lines, toys on floors. None of them ever moved back. 3 days became forever. Then comes the part that shaped the region for 40 years. Radiation doesn't stay put. The core burns for days, and stopping it takes an army, helicopter crews dumping sand and boron onto the open reactor, miners digging beneath it by hand, hundreds of thousands of workers later called liquidators, sent in to clean a mess no one fully understood. Many gave years of their health to buy the rest of the world its safety. Meanwhile, the wind carries a plume of radioactive particles across Europe. A stand of pine trees near the plant absorbs so much it turns rust red and dies standing up. People call it the Red Forest. Still one of the most contaminated places on Earth. The government draws a circle around the plant, 30 kilometers in every direction, and calls it the Exclusion Zone. Around 2,600 square kilometers where people are simply not allowed to live anymore. And the strange thing is what happens to that land once the humans leave. You'd expect it dead. It isn't. Wolves, boar, deer, elk, wild horses, animals move back in and multiply. Without people, without farming, without hunting, the zone quietly becomes one of the largest accidental wildlife reserves in Europe. Nature didn't wait for permission. It just returned. But returned doesn't mean unharmed. And this is where the mutations come in, and where you have to be careful because the truth is stranger than the myth. No two-headed monsters. What scientists actually found was subtler and, in a way, more unsettling. Birds in the worst areas with smaller brains and shorter lives, trees growing in warped, irregular shapes, insects with damaged wings. The damage is real, but it's written in the fine details, not in horror movie shapes. In humans, the clearest long-term mark was on the children of the region. Thousands developed thyroid cancer because radioactive iodine settled into milk and food and gathered in their small bodies. Caught early, most survived. But it was a cancer that should never have happened, and it happened because no one told them to stop drinking the milk in time. And the radiation didn't just fade. Some particles vanished in days. Others, like cesium-137, take about 30 years just to lose half their strength. That's why, decades on, parts of the zone are still fenced, measured, and watched. The reactor was buried under a rushed concrete shell, and when that began to crumble, the world spent over €1 billion on a giant steel arch to seal it, built to hold for 100 years. The cleanup didn't end in 1986. In a real sense, it never ended. So here's the full picture. The explosion lasted seconds. The consequences are measured in centuries. One reactor, on one night, poisoned land humans still can't fully live on almost 40 years later. And yet that same land filled back up with life the moment we stepped away. That's the uncomfortable truth Chernobyl leaves you with. The disaster was one of the worst things humans ever did to a place. And the recovery of that place happened not because of us, but because of our absence. You were one of the engineers on the night shift, one pair of hands in a room full of them. But the story that outlived all of you was never really about one night or one person. It was about how long a single mistake can echo, and how quietly the world moves on without us. If you made it this far, you're the kind of person this channel is for. Subscribe. See you in the next video.